The webcast is now live. Over to the chairman of the South Northamptonshire Planning Committee for the final time, Councillor Richard Dallin.
Indeed, and good afternoon to everyone. We start off, as is customary, with apologies for absence and appointment of substitutes. Leslie Farrell from Democratic Services, over to you.
Well, we don't have any substitutes today, Chairman. We don't have Councillor Carol Clark with us, so I don't know if she'll perhaps be in later, but I would accept her apologies at the moment.
And we're also, Councillor Semiotis will be joining us in a short...
Slightly late.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest is item 2. And Councillor Hollowell, just to say your piece.
My usual declaration on all matters concerned with archaeology.
Thank you. I see no other declarations, so we'll move to item 3, which are the minutes from the meeting we held on the 4th of February this year. I trust you've had a chance to read them. Is it your wish that I sign these pretty soon, in fact, as a correct record before our council concludes? I see nods and thumbs in the right direction, so thank you very much indeed. Thank you for all of that. Item 4, Chairman's announcements. Well, as already mentioned, this is the last meeting of the Planning Committee under the banner of South Northamptonshire District Council. We have been going since 1974. We were the Development Control Committee in the past, but we've been called Planning for some while now. But it is expected that will be applications for us to consider next month under a new banner, the Shadow Authority for West Northamptonshire Council. So await a date on that one. Otherwise, obviously, we're yet again in virtual form. So make sure your phones are muted and only speak when I invite you so to do. Otherwise, if you would keep your microphones muted, I'm grateful to you for that. Right, well, we can press on then to our applications. We have 4 to consider this afternoon, and we'll start off with the one that's on page 11 of your public document pack, and this is land south of the wharf at Bugbrook, and I'll call upon the case officer Suzanne Taylor to describe it for us. Suzanne.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen because I've got a presentation to show.
Okay, that's fine.
So hopefully you've got the
yeah,
my screen there.
Yes, go ahead.
Right, okay, so item 5, as you say, this is land south of the wharf. It's an application for 52 dwellings with associated landscaping and infrastructure. So first of all, turning to the site plan, the site lies on the southwestern edge of Bugbrook Village. It's between existing residential development at the Firs and on the Peace Hill and the Glebe. And then we have the canal and the wharf to the west. The site lies just outside of the village confines boundary. The confines boundary is denoted by this dotted line. So as you can see, it lies outside. We've got Bugbrook Conservation Area to the east. That's this pink area here. And the canal, the Grand Union Canal Conservation Area to the east here, this pink area. There's public right of way along the canal, the KD 021, and then we've got the KD 003 footpath, which runs through the field to the south, connecting up to West End Bugbrook. The site's within the 500-metre canal buffer zone. And you can also see on this plan that we've got some small parts of the site within flood zone 2, which is this lighter blue colour, and a very small bit over here at the edge where the footpath link would come in flood zone 3, which is this darker blue colour. There are also some areas of high, medium and low risk of surface water flooding within the site area. Not shown on this plan, but if you look at the plan in the local plan part 2, there's also the green infrastructure corridor which runs along the canal. So moving now to the aerial plan, you can see on here that the site is basically comprised of a large agricultural field in arable use. It's roughly an L shape. We've got a copse to the north within the site, and on the edge of the site here to the south is another existing copse. We've also got existing hedge line along the canal and also along the boundaries with the existing residential. So the copse to the south divides this L-shaped field into sort of almost two parts. There's just a gap here. And it's really on this section that the development is proposed. You can obviously see the marina and the canal on this side. So I'll just run you through some site photographs so you can get a flavour of what the area is like. So this photograph that I'm showing is from the Lichborough Road, looking south across the site. This is the boundary with the Firs, the neighbouring property. So this photograph is a view looking right or to the east from approximately the position where the vehicular access would enter the site, the proposed vehicular access. So what we can see here, this is the canal bridge. So you can see that the land slopes up to go over the bridge. This is the wharf building on the left-hand side. And then another photograph again from the proposed vehicular access, but this time looking towards the village, looking right. And then again, this is also from the Lichborough Road. This is another view of the tree boundary with the neighbouring property, the Firs. Now this photograph is actually within the site now, and we're looking north back up towards the Lichborough Road. You can see the car park there as the reference. This is the wharf building and the boundary with the canal, and this is the northern copse that you could see on the aerial plan. Then this is a sort of closer up view looking through the hedge on the eastern boundary, looking towards the rear of a property at the Glebe. This is number 14, the Glebe. So you can see how close to the property the boundary of the site runs. And then this is a little bit further south, looking again at number 14, the Glebe. So again, you can see it's quite a close relationship of this new dwelling to the proposed site. This is a little bit further again. So again, this is number 10, the Glebe. Number 14, the Glebe is here. This is the back of the back boundary to the Firs. So we're looking at this tree boundary along the eastern edge of the site. This is a view looking west towards the southern copse. And the SUDS that's proposed will go in this location here. And this tree line is where the canal is the other side of that. So you can see that's a couple of dwellings that are on the other side of the canal. This is looking from the footpath that runs through the field to the south of the scheme. So these are properties on the Lees and on the Glebe, and this is the copse, the southern copse that you can see, and just this little bit here is the gap, and if you go up through there, that's where the main development site would be. This line here of the grass along the edge of the field is the rough line that there's a proposed footpath link from the development to the public footpath where the photograph is taken that takes you into West End. This is a sort of more distant view from the footpath to the south. So again, we're looking at the back of houses on the Glebe. This is the southern copse. You've got the wharf building in the centre there, and that sort of gap is where the houses will be going in this section here. This is a view now from the canal bridge, looking down obviously onto the towpath. This is the copse and the existing tree line along the canal. You can just glimpse the site through those trees. And then finally, we've got a view looking south on the canal with the towpath and the hedge line running along the site. So, as I mentioned before, the application is for 52 dwellings. They would be comprised of 50% affordables. What I'm just showing you to start with, though, just to orientate ourselves, this proposal here was originally provided by the applicant. So they'd originally proposed 60 units in this layout. Officers had some concerns about the layout, the relationship with the canal and the relationship of some of the parking areas and dwellings, etc. And also just the amount of frontage parking, etc. So we worked collaboratively with the applicants on the layout and the design. And so this is now what's being proposed. Which is, as I say, 52 dwellings. We've got the 50% affordable units being proposed here. They're the ones that are denoted by the coloured spots. So they've been sort of pepper potted through the site. The scheme's also proposing a centrally located children's play area. And as you can see, the majority of that copse to the north and this area to the south are being retained as part of the scheme. And as we mentioned earlier with the views, the Lichborough Road is the main point of vehicular access into the site. There's some proposed footpath links as well onto the towpath and the public footpath along the canal. So there's a couple of links proposed there, and a new footpath link that would go as I say, along behind the properties on the Glebe and the Lees and connect up with West End. So I've got a couple of sections through the site. I'll come on to the elevational treatment of this 3-storey block later because this has been revised. But effectively, just to give you a sort of a sense of what the scheme would look like. This section, for example, at the top, we're looking at a cut through. So this is the Lichborough Road, where effectively this we're sort of stood looking from the canal, but obviously without the trees and the hedge line. So you've got this proposed 3-storey block, and then the houses sort of vernacular style dropping down to through the south of the site. This view here is east-west through the site from the Lichborough Road. So this is from the road looking south. This one is from the south-north looking through the site from the west on the main. So this is the main spine road if you were looking west. And the bottom one is looking at the scheme from the main site spine road looking east. And then all of these sections are basically taken east-west through the site at these various points, just to give you a sense of the relationship of the scheme to the canal. That's the wharf building. So in this section, you can see the height of the wharf building, and the 3-storey is very similar. So the applicants have also provided these 3D visuals to sort of illustrate what the scheme could look like. So this top one is sort of as you would view it from the wharf or the canal bridge. Obviously the trees are not here, so this would be screened or softened quite considerably by planting. As I say, I've got a different elevational treatment for this block here of 3-storey units. The bottom illustration is as if you were viewing the road from the Lichborough, viewing the scheme from the Lichborough Road. And this is the wharf building, and the canal would run along here. This is another illustration looking towards the canal, looking west from the sort of centre of the site. This is the play area with the houses arranged around the play area. And this is another view looking straight south from the Lichborough Road. So this is the what you would see as you're stood on the main road. So this is the 3-storey building next to the canal that I was just explaining. It's changed from that gable-fronted proposal. So what we're looking at, this is the front elevation here to the canal. So it's just a flush-fronted building. It's meant to, it looks more similar to the sort of 3-storey buildings that we have at Stoke Bruin and Kislingbury and Blisworth. So it's meant to look like a sort of historical industrial wharf type building that would have been on the edge of the canal. And this was redesigned in discussion with the Heritage Officer and the Canals and Rivers Trust. So I'll just show you a few examples of the proposed house types, just so you can get a flavour of those. But again, these have all been amended to accord with our design guide and to sort of use a very traditional kind of vernacular approach. So the first example you see here is a 4-bedroom affordable unit, which is in stone. And it's sort of, it's not discernible from a market house. We've got an example here of a market 3-bedroom property in stone. And this is an example of one of the 1-bedroom bungalows. It's obviously a semi-detached version. So they're effectively, this is 2 1-bedroom bungalows, and those are finished in brick. And then we have a, this is a maisonette. So there are 2 1-bed units in here, one on the ground floor, one on the first floor. It's designed to look like a fairly traditional house, but finished in brick, but there's actually 1-bed units in there. And then finally, I have an example here of 3-bedroom market houses, which would be arranged in a terrace. This example would be used next to the canal building. So I don't have any verbal updates to make to the report. The recommendation in this case is for refusal for the reasons set out in the report. So to summarise those, the main reason for refusal is on the principle. The council has a 5-year housing land supply, and so we should be applying our development plan policies of basically no development outside of settlement confines. The second reason for refusal is related to the lack of a Section 106 obligation. There's a number of mitigations for impacts from the development that would be needed to provide additional infrastructure, and that's not been submitted so far. The third is to do with residential amenity. There are a couple of areas within the site where we haven't achieved the minimum separation distance standards of 18 metres. So there are a number of plots that would need to be relocated or changed in order to accommodate that. So at the moment, there would be a residential amenity concern. We also need a soft landscaping scheme because they would need to provide some additional soft landscaping along the canal. And also at the moment, we've got an objection from the lead local flood authority on the basis that surface water drainage details are inadequate. So that at the moment stands as another reason for refusal. So as I say, recommendation for refusal for the reasons described and set out in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, just to clarify, also you have the application site outside the settlement confines, but you didn't mention that in your reason for refusal.
Yes, yeah, the principle is that it's outside of the settlement confines. Yes, Chairman.
Thank you. All right, if you could revert the screen now and ask members if they've got any questions they'd like to put to you at this stage. I see some hands up already. I'll go to Councillor Ken Pritchard.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a couple of points. how far are the three-storey properties from the canal itself?
If I share my screen, I can show you the layout plan. I don't know off the top of my head in meters, but let me just get the layout plan up.
And also with regards to if pedestrians were using the footpath, could they actually see into the houses?
So these are the three-storey units here. Can you see that on the screen? The canal is here. So there's a pretty decent bit of separation there. The footpath sweeps around. There's a sort of a landscape buffer. And then you've also got the hedge line, which you saw on the photographs. That's a lot of that lies within the Canal and River Trust ownership. What we want to see, which we haven't got details of at the moment, which is one of the refusal reasons, is that we want to see this landscaping along here augmented. So ultimately, there shouldn't be a huge amount of overlooking. It won't screen it entirely. You will see the buildings from the canal, but the visibility won't be an open frontage.
And also the last point is with regards to vehicle charging points. Obviously there are, maisonettes and also obviously terraced houses. What provisions are being made for vehicle charging points?
There are no proposals for those at the moment, obviously because we're looking to, it's recommended for refusal. I mean, if the application was to be approved, then that is something that we would need to have further details of, but at this stage we don't have that information.
Because obviously this is one of our criteria with new properties at the moment.
All right, well, thank you for that question. Let us go on. Councillor Bignell, you've got your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My concerns again are around those properties that overlook the canal itself. At the moment, you quite rightly say there's some vegetation, and that vegetation is quite high. But if you go further along the canal, the River Trust have layered the hedge. Like you layer a hedge, and it probably ends up less than a metre high. And kind of, if they manage to persuade somebody to do that, they'd have a great view over the canal. And I think we need to preserve some form of...
Is this a question, Councillor Bignell? It's the off.
It is a question.
Right,
what are we going to do to ensure that the height of the vegetation between those houses and the canal is maintained at a level that would obscure the canal and not encourage people to have the properties there to overlook the canal? That's my first question. I've got a second one afterwards.
All right, let's have the first one answered first then, please. Suzanne Taylor?
Well, as I say, I mean, it's obviously recommended for refusal, but in the event that it was to be approved, then you could attach conditions to do with maintaining the height of the hedge to a certain height. Brilliant.
The second question, because it's a canal, it's actually a conservation area in its own right, isn't it? Because that's the Canal Trust. How far does that conservation area extend beyond the boundary of the footpath of the canal?
I can show you that on the
That's the question, Richard.
Thank you.
The original plan. Let me just share my screen again.
I understand it extends to either side of the canal, a conservation area. I wasn't sure how far it is, though.
Yes, I don't know how well you can see this, but it's that pink area. So it's effectively, it's all of the land really that's outside of the site. I mean, it's literally the site, the boundary of the site runs along the edge of the conservation area.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Another question is, Councillor Pritchard, have you your hand down? Once the electronic hands, if they can be removed once unless you've got a foot, no. Well, Councillor Johns, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My question is regarding the proposed footpath along the edge of the field. I mean, is it proposed to surface that and provide street lighting?
I don't have details of what that would entail. It could potentially, again, if it was something we were looking to recommend for approval, those details are something we could require by condition. but at this stage, because it's recommended for refusal, that detail is not provided.
All right. Any further questions to the officer at this stage? Councillor Samiotis.
Yeah, I have a question regarding flooding. I don't know, what the difference is between a canal and a river. Well, I do, but flooding wise, I'm just surprised that people are even putting out applications so close to rivers and canals when you see what's happening around the country with all the flooding. Why are we even, I know this is up for rejection, but why would we even consider an application so close to the water?
Sorry.
Go on.
Yeah, so I was going to say, obviously they have to provide a flood risk assessment with the application, and they've provided details of surface water drainage, etc. So at the moment, the Environment Agency have not objected to this, but we do have an outstanding objection from surface water drainage. So that is a matter that still needs to be resolved and is a reason for refusal. But yeah, it's up to the applicants to demonstrate that the site either won't flood or that, there's various mitigation can be provided to prevent that. So obviously in this case, there isn't evidence of this flooding as a result of the canal. There is a little bit of surface water flooding. I think that happens in just a small part of the site, but it's outside of the flood zones. Most of it, only the Suds area to the south was within flood zone 2.
All right, thank you. I see no further questions being asked, so I will now turn to the applicant. I see he's on one of my screens in front of me. Good afternoon, Mr. Ned Fox. Good afternoon to you. If you could unmute your microphone. Yes, there you have. Right, you can hear us all right, can you?
Yes, fine, thank you. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, as is customary, you have 3 minutes in which to make your remarks to the committee, and then be prepared to take questions if they want to put any questions to you. So when you're ready, go ahead, please.
Of course. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to address the matters deemed to weigh against this application in paragraph 11.2 of the committee report. So a central driver of the policy cited here is to resist development in open countryside. And on a site-specific level, developing beyond the village confines is justified in paragraph 9.43 of the report. The report states that the site represents a logical infilling of a gap between the edge of the village and the defensible boundary of the canal. In terms of housing need, paragraph 9.5 of the committee report states that the council can only demonstrate a 5.18 year supply of housing land. This is marginal position, which obligates the authority to approve quality development in sustainable locations such as Bugbrook. In the context of the Rotherthorpe appeal and the evidence that supports the live appeals at Hartwell, Toaster, Middleton Cheney and Greens Norton, South Northants cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply. Therefore, the policies cited are out of date with regard to the supply of housing, which triggers the presumption in favour of sustainable development. In our view, this development would not create unacceptable living conditions for existing residents. The dense 10-metre high hedge on the boundary between the existing homes on the glebe is being retained, and therefore there'll be no adverse impact on amenity. And in any event, further amends to the layout could be made to address this. We've made numerous changes to the canal frontage, as has been demonstrated by Suzanne. This now includes an 8 to 12-metre buffer between the canal and the proposed properties, which will be landscaped. This was deemed to be acceptable in early February, and then a week or so later we were advised that the application was going to be recommended for refusal on policy grounds. This is after 16 months of negotiation to get to this point, and we feel that another 4 weeks may have enabled us to finalise the layout and prepare a quality landscaping scheme that we could have presented to committee. That also impacts on the details around drainage as well. So these issues that are cited as weighing against the development are subjective or easily resolvable, but the benefits of the development are objective. The application will boost the supply of housing in the short term, subject to agreeing any conditions under Section 106, which we will be happy to do. We aim to be on site as soon as possible, likely by the end of the year. This will not only address chronic supply issues in the district, also stimulate economic activity that will deliver rural investment and support local services. The development will provide 26 homes for vulnerable individuals and families currently stuck in limbo on the local authority's housing waiting list. And in the context of a demonstrable undersupply of affordable homes, as explained in the report, South Northants, this is an opportunity to give those in need of the chance of a safe, secure and efficient home. The proposed green infrastructure enhancements will also make provision for new and existing residents to access the countryside and the local amenities using sustainable modes of transport. And the net gain in biodiversity will provide new and enhanced habitats for valued local flora and fauna. So on the basis that the benefits demonstrably outweigh the adverse impacts, the presumption in favour of sustainable development should apply. And in summary, to avoid the cost and delay of another appeal, I would like to seek a deferral of this application so that we can fix the layout and continue to work collaboratively with officers, which will then enable us to further agree the landscaping details and the outstanding drainage issues to the satisfaction of the local flood authority.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Fox. Now, an opportunity for questions from members to you. I see Councillor Bigman first. Question from you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Fox. You questioned our 5-year land supply, but I would ask, what is your reaction to the last 2 appeals we've been to, which was Rotherthorpe and latterly Grange Park, where in both cases we actually won, and the land supply is actually upheld. So I don't understand where you're coming through with your question of our land supply.
The land supply position wasn't upheld at the Rotherthorpe appeal. It was deemed to be less than 3 years. It was the sustainability of the settlement that weighed against development in that case. In terms of the Grange Park appeal, I believe that was in relation to claims by the appellant that it was relatable to the Northampton related development area, and so should have been considered as part of supply for the NRDA as opposed to South Northampton itself. But I mean, I've reviewed the evidence for the forthcoming appeals, and yeah, I mean, the evidence is there. It's clear in terms of the National Planning Policy Guidance that counting oversupply and also trying to hive off the NRDA as a separate policy area is not in accordance with national policy. So that's the position that the Planning Inspectorate took at the Rotherthorpe appeal, which is why their view was that you've got less than 3 years supply. So hence the reasons for me stating that in my statement.
Councillor Bigwell, do you want a further question? No? All right, thank you very much. Any other members wish to ask Mr. Fox, the applicant, a question? I see not. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, Mr. Fox. If you would like to cut your video and your sound, and obviously our committee deliberations will continue without you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye to you. All right, just waiting for the video to go. Thank you. Now we'll have a ward member who is not a member of the committee. I will invite to speak first of all, and that's Councillor David Harries. Councillor Harries, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, my comments are included in the report, so I can be mercifully brief with my observations here. But I do want to say I've been increasingly concerned, as you're probably aware, that over a period of time now, larger villages, and this is particularly regarding Bugbrook, it's sort of a tick box approach. Secondary school, yes. Primary school, yes. Doctor's surgery, yes. Shop, yes. Whereas in actual fact, the schools and the medical centre are absolutely full. There's no spare capacity there at all. So there is not a facility for any of these things in the village at the moment. And frankly, under another Section 106 application that I've been involved in for some years, I've been assured by the primary healthcare people that there is no scope, because of the type of the site where the surgery is located, to extend it. So it's just impossible to improve or extend existing provision. And it really just seems to me quite wrong that we count a larger village like Bugbrook has all these facilities simply because there are buildings in the village, whereas in actual fact, there is no capacity there. There is no capacity. And the shop the only general purpose shop is far too small, totally inadequate for a village of our size. And again, it's on a site where it cannot be extended. And so it's perfectly plain when you look at sustainability. Bugbrook cannot sustain a further development of this size. It's absolutely overwhelmed already, and the infrastructure is creaking already as it is. I shan't go into the highways issue. I mean, it's very odd, but Highways Authority make their own minds up, and they baffle me regularly in their decisions. But clearly, I'm pleased that the report recommends refusal, and I do think we must refuse, and I hope that we look further to do a better job of protecting these larger villages for such overdevelopment that will undermine the community and are entirely unsustainable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harries. All right, if you lose your vision and microphone as well, we say goodbye to you, and the committee therefore can continue to discuss this. We have the recommendation to refuse permission.
Well, the second ward member, Chairman.
Well, I'm going to. Well, yes, I'm going to come to that. If you would only just allow me to do as I customarily do, to introduce the committee to discuss it, and I was going to call upon you as the other ward member to speak first. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to commend the report that the officer has very well put together, and I think it's an excellent report. I just want to extend a couple of things that Councillor Harris has said. I mean, as part of the interim rural housing policy, which I'm sure John Townsend remembers, some years ago, we have taken about 200 houses in this village, which probably represents 20% increase in the size of this village. And as a service village, as David points out, is actually based on size of population. It's not based on amenities, because King Sutton is one of the service villages and it doesn't even have a secondary school. But it's the larger village. We're a larger village. We've taken 20%, a bit like Middleton Cheney. So I see no reason we should take any more. And again, echoing Councillor Harris's point about highways, I'm absolutely amazed that they're allowing an access. We're on effectively a brow of a hill, but highways are highways, and I won't I won't argue with their technicalities of how they measure it, but it's not a very good entrance. But yes, I commend the report and thank the officer for a very good job. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Harries is still in vision. If you could turn your video off, I'd be grateful. Thank you. All right, continuing with views from the committee, who else would like to join in this discussion? Councillor Townsend.
No, thanks. I remember we had a site visit on this one 6 years ago. So it's been through its hoops. I think I do. I mean, I agree with what both local members have said. But I think it's really across the whole of our district that we have this problem, that we're granting all these planning applications, and is the infrastructure there? Well, I really question whether it is. But actually, on this one, I'm just looking at the reasons. Go back to the 5-year land supply. We don't talk about the 5-year land supply and the reasons for refusal. Is that intentional? We talk about being outside the settlement, but I can't see that specifically say we've got a 5-year land supply. I mean, we either have got a 5-year land supply or we haven't.
They'd intervene there. Let's just get the officer just to clarify whether that is part of the reason why it's recommended refusal. Suzanne Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the first reason for refusal doesn't specifically talk about the 5-year housing land supply, but what it talks about is the application of the policies from the development plan, so policy R1 and LH1, which in themselves talk about the fact that development should be kept within settlement boundaries. Obviously, the NPPF says that if you don't have a 5-year housing land supply, then your policies won't be considered up to date. It's part of that argument, but it's not specifically referred to because the development plan policies are the place to go to say that this is unacceptable in principle.
Councillor Townsend, I interrupted you. Go on.
No, I mean, it's so following on, I mean, I'm glad that we are putting this down for refusal, because if we've got if as the applicant said, we've only got a 5.1 year land supply, well, we have got a proper land supply. Therefore, in that sense, the thing is premature. But I just wish we could have a be definite about what our land supply figures are. It is very worrying, and of course, if we come in, if you say things are premature, which is what we should be saying, if you were to allow this prematurely, then you actually increase the amount of housing going in, because these things will be, believe you me, this will be built out, as he says, very quickly, and so there'll be more people, and then those figures will not be actually kind of to get against us. We will have yet more things. The thing ratchets up as we get quicker and quicker. So yeah, let's refuse it. But I think it is worrying that if it is only a 5.1, if that is true.
Well, I tell you what, why don't we bring in Paul Seckington, who's the Senior Planning Officer here today, who can perhaps clarify the land supply situation as is of the moment, since it keeps being raised. Paul Seckington.
Thank you, Chair. As detailed in Suzanne's report, the 5-year supply position, as we see it, is we have an 8.26 worth of supply, taking into account previous oversupply that's taken place. And if you don't include that previous oversupply, then we calculate to have a 5.18 worth of supply in the district of housing. So we consider we do have over 5 years of supply, and that's what we have been saying consistently in all the applications that we've taken recently to planning committee for these sites in villages. And we consider therefore the local plan to be up to date and to refuse these applications.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Just come back on that one, Paul. At what point will someone decide whether it is 8.1? I mean, whether this oversupply is allowed to be counted? It seems to me quite right that we shouldn't. You have to allow that oversupply to be counted. Otherwise, the district is developing much too fast, in my opinion. And that's, when I look at when I first started here all those years ago, I mean, we had a population of something like 70,000, I think it was. We're now 95,000. That's 25,000 houses, 25,000 people, extra people. That's, well, I mean, welcome. So they all enjoy South Northamptonshire. But, I mean, it takes a lot of servicing those people. And so that's why there's such a shortage of schools, of health, and all the rest of it. So unless we have some control, then I despair.
The Roversthorpe appeal mentioned that we shouldn't include previous oversupply, but we had other appeals that said that we can. So that was one appeal decision that went a particular way. What we're saying in all our current appeals that we've got in is that we should take into account previous oversupply, therefore an 8.26, and even if you don't, we've still got a supply. So whichever way you look at it, we've got a supply. And where we will get an answer, because they didn't really go into detail in the Grange Park one, the applicant said it was more about the RDA model it was in, or whether it was now. So we've got inquiries coming up for sites in Middleton Cheney and other villages and other appeals that we've got, and they will give us the answer, which is the right way forward. We consider we are right, whichever way you look at it, but we'll wait and see.
I wish you well.
All right, well, I hope we've sort of clarified that for those people viewing and the committee. Councillor Hollowell, to you.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a lot about this scheme as a scheme that I like. I think that in isolation to the surrounding area, there's a lot to be said for the layout, and I think the officer has done a very good job in working with the applicant. There is one small design feature that I don't like, and that's the porches. And you'll remember, Chairman, last October, I was trying to make a point on another application concerning porches. This is exactly the same off-the-peg design. It doesn't meet the South Northamptonshire Design Code. The Design Code says quite clearly that porches are not a normal feature in South Northamptonshire, but where they are to be used, they should reflect the local vernacular. I will put money that there will not be a Porsche of this design in Bugbrook, which is more than 15 years old. These just, but that's a small point, but nonetheless important. The fact is that this doesn't accord with the development plan. And the officer has already pointed out R1 Part G, which is the main policy within the core strategy for rural housing. Also SS1, but more particularly LH1, I think, of LP2. But apart from the policies in the core strategy, it starts off with a whole list of objectives. And again, this development doesn't really meet quite a number of them, but in particular, 5, it does nothing to support Northampton Town Centre. It doesn't add to educational attainment. The housing, it should be in a sustainable location. Now, I know we've got a public transport bus service there in Bugbrook, but the transport statement itself says that 80% of the traffic movements from this estate will be by car. I don't call that sustainable. It does nothing under Objective 12 to protect and support the rural community. Under 13, it doesn't support rural diversification or employment, and so on. So it's not just the policies, it's contrary to so many of the objectives of the core strategy. Regarding the housing requirement for South Northamptonshire, you've just discussed this, that the most recent authority has to be the Grange Park inquiry. And at Grange Park, which was only in October of last year, even the applicant accepted that South Northampton got a 5-year supply. So that's good enough for me. If committee were minded to give approval regarding the proposed new right of way, 3 things that we should expect. First of all, that it's dedicated properly as a public right of way. It should have an appropriate surface and it should have appropriate lighting. And I'll just finish off by saying that I've got sympathy with the applicant who has spent a lot of time on this with their officers. And again, I do wonder whether we are spending too much ratepayers' money stringing these applications out and effectively doing a consultant's job for applicants and just making the whole thing, delaying the whole process. I can't help but feel if something is submitting it is clearly going to be contrary to the development plan, then the applicant should be told that straight away. That's all I have to say, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Turn now to Councillor Johns.
Yes, Chairman, I certainly agree with the points made by Councillor Holloway and others that we have a 5-year land supply. This is contrary to policy, and the development site is not in a sustainable position. But picking up on the last points that Councillor Holloway makes, it does frustrate me that this is another example where, whilst the development itself has some merit in terms of its design, that's almost entirely attributable to the input from our own officers. And why can't developers read, understand and follow the design guidelines we have? I mean, they don't even seem to have understood or conformed to national policies in respect of density. So I would also agree that we can spend a lot of time working with developers, but we're the planning authority, we're not the developer. And I think in areas where plainly an application is likely to be refused because of policy reasons, should we waste our time guiding a developer through the points of our design guides? It's for them to read and understand and bring forward sustainable applications in positions where they're much more likely to gain approval.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Johns. Councillor Surgeson-Brooke. If you could unmute your microphone, please, so that we can hear you.
Sorry.
It's all right, go ahead.
I completely agree with the last 2 speakers. And the officer should say, you know what our policies are, you produce the plans. And if they don't produce the plans, it's just one more reason why we turn it down. Saves everybody time and trouble. At least it saves our officers time and trouble. And it's the ratepayers who have to pay for it. So if the developers could actually do the work themselves, and they could be told to do this, but it's a very good reason for turning it down if they don't do it. So that's all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. We've actually just approved our local plan part 2, which highlights the situation with regards to applications outside the village confines, unless it's with regards to special merit. We have recently declined similar sort of applications on this particular basis, and so therefore I don't see why we should actually go against the officer's recommendation and approve this particular application.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other members wish to make a comment in our discussion, or failing that, I look to one of you to propose either the officer's recommendation or a contrary proposal. Councillor Bignell, do speak.
Yes, I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation, Chairman.
To refuse permission.
To refuse, yeah. So the recommendation as stated.
Second, Councillor Pritchard.
Yes, I would like to second that particular officer's application.
All right, we have a formal proposal before us, so I'll cross to Leslie Farrell to call the names out for the vote, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start with Councillor Bignell. So we're voting here on a refusal of this application. So are you for or against refusal?
For.
Councillor Breeze?
For.
Councillor Budden?
For.
Councillor Cooper?
For.
Councillor Dallin?
For.
Councillor Hollowell?
For.
Councillor Johns?
For.
Councillor Samiotis?
For.
Councillor Sergeson Brooke?
For.
Councillor Pritchard?
For.
Councillor Townsend?
For.
Councillor Lane Wiltshire?
For.
And Councillor Paul Wiltshire?
For.
So that's unanimous, Chairman. That application's been refused.
Thank you very much indeed. So let us move on then to page 47 of the running order for today. And this is our second application, land at Norwood Farm, Sandy Lane, Harpole, and the reserve matters application. Once again, Suzanne Taylor is the case officer. Over to you, Suzanne.
Oh, excuse me, Chairman. Could we just ask Councillor Harries to leave the meeting now?
Oh, yes, certainly. Would Councillor Harries, would you leave the meeting now, please? Completely. I also noticed that we have he isn't there on screen. Yes, Mr. Colby, the agent, if he could not have his vision on at the moment or microphone, I'd be grateful at this stage. Let's see, Tim Colby, if you could just unmute mute your microphone, thank you, and also cover your video, turn the video off. So, and we only have committee members on screen whilst we're discussing it until it comes to your point.
Still looking, Chair.
He's looking.
Good.
Right. Good. We're in business. Right. And now I will go. Suzanne, you're going to talk us through this particular application, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, as you say, this item 6, this is land at Norwood Farm, Sandy Lane, Harpole. So you may recall that this application or planning permission was granted in hybrid for up to 1,900 homes on this site near Northampton last year. And what they're seeking now, this is a reserve matters application for some of the details to do with site-wide infrastructure. So looking at, first of all, at the site location plan, as you can see, quite a large proportion of the site lies within a special landscape area. That's the blue hatched area. Now, the majority of this site lies within an area allocated under policy N9A of the Joint Core Strategy, which concerns the Norwood Farm Sustainable Urban Extension. There is a small section up in this top corner, which actually is within the policy N4 allocation of the Joint Core Strategy. That's the Northampton West SUE, or Sustainable Urban Extension. So there's a little bit of overlap between these two SUEs, just this corner. There is also a small section of this site, which I'm identifying now with my cursor, which is outside of the allocation. So effectively is within the open countryside. So now turning to the aerial plan, as you can see, the site is primarily within arable agricultural use currently. It covers almost 105 hectares of land. We've got the edge of Northampton's urban area just on the edge. So this area that I'm identifying now is the sort of St Crispin's part of Northampton. And then we've got New Duston and the New Sandy Lane, which I'm indicating here to the north. Harpole Village is this area here. And then we've got an existing group of houses which face onto the A45100 and at the south end of the site. The site is bisected by the old, we'll call it the old Sandy Lane, just to distinguish it from the new Sandy Lane Relief Road that I'll come on to later. So the old Sandy Lane is the existing road which sort of bisects the site, as I'm indicating now, and runs along to the 45100. We've got the Roman Road running along the northern boundary, and then this turns into the Berrywood Road as it enters Northampton town. So I'll run you through some photographs of the site just so you can get a flavour of what it's like. So this is stood sort of effectively in the centre of the site on the old Sandy Lane. This is looking east towards the Norwood Farm buildings, you can see here. And St Crispin's is in the background, so you can see the development here at St Crispin's and the tower. In the background. You can see the topography of the site. There is some quite steeply sloping sections to this land, which they have to take account of. So this is on the sort of northernmost extent of the site, looking south. This is the old Sandy Lane. This is the top part of the site here and here. This is the Roman Road. This is the new Sandy Lane, and then we've got Berrywood Road going off on the left-hand side. This photograph is taken from the public right-of-way at the easternmost extent of the site. We're on sort of within Northampton here, and we're looking, as the sort of St Crispin's is behind us, and we're looking towards Harpole. And then this is at the southernmost extent. What we're looking at here is the A45100. And these are the houses on South View, as it's known as. So the site actually sits behind these dwellings. You can't really see the site from this position. This is a point from the southeast on the A45100. We're looking northeast towards the site, which is denoted by the red line. It's obviously in the distance here. And then the final photograph, this is looking east from Harpole with the football club, rugby club in the foreground. The site, this is where the country park part of the site will go, and you can sort of see towards St Crispin's in the distance. So first of all, I thought it might be useful to show you the illustrative phasing plan that's been submitted with the application, with the application, and with some of the conditions discharge applications that I'm dealing with separately. So this shows you the anticipated phases and parcels that will be coming forward and in what order. So effectively what this planning application is applying for is everything under this list, which is the site-wide infrastructure. So what we're looking at are the red dotted lines, the red highways that are shown. So the one that I'm showing through the centre of the site, this is the Sandy Lane Relief Road, which has already got full planning permission. And then in outline, we've granted consent for these primary roads. So these dotted lines. So we've got 2 new accesses from the old Sandy Lane, which are agreed in outline. And then we have the new roundabouts from the Roman Road and Berrywood Road, and a spine road, a new primary road coming in at the top of the site. So it will serve this phase 1 and phase 1A. Also included in the application are some of the details of the SUDs, the attenuation ponds. So there are some in phase 1A, some either side of the Sandy Lane Relief Road here. There are 2 large ponds in the Country Park area here, and then 2 to the north around the new Sandy Lane Relief Road roundabout at the northern end of the site. So yes, it's the provision of the Sandy Lane Relief Road, as I say, which we've got more details of now, although that has been granted in for a full application. There's also some cycleway details on the drawings as well. We have some more information about surface water and foul drainage infrastructure to facilitate the residential phases. And there are also some associated areas of landscaping and open space, which will adjoin basically this infrastructure, so along the highways and around the attenuation ponds. So what I'm just showing here is just to set some context, is this is the access and movement plan that was granted permission under the hybrid. So this shows the Sandy Lane Relief Road, these primary roads coming into the site, and the accesses that are being given, we've been given details of now. So just to give you a flavour of some of the details that have been supplied, I was just going to run you through some of those plans. So the plan before us now is the proposed Sandy Lane access, the northernmost access. So this comes off of, as I say, the old Sandy Lane. We've got one of the new primary roads coming in that would serve phase 2B. And then this is the southernmost new access off of Old Sandy Lane, which would serve phase 1A. And then this shows the roundabout details for the new access to the northern part of the site. So this would connect the new Sandy Lane Relief Road into the new Sandy Lane. And this will connect up the Berrywood Road and Wegswood Road with the scheme. And then finally, this is an overview plan of some of the landscaping details that have been provided. So this shows us that basically all of the landscaping associated with the attenuation ponds and the proposed sections of road that are going to come forward, that we've got details of the landscaping treatments for those areas. So I don't have any verbal updates to make. The recommendation is that the committee delegates to the Assistant Director for Planning and Economy to grant permission, subject to the resolution of outstanding highways and drainage matters with technical consultees, and any conditions as deemed necessary in agreement with the technical consultees. There is also a further recommendation that if we can't resolve those by the 9th of March, or we haven't agreed an extension of time, that we are given delegated authority to refuse the permission for the reasons set out in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so we revert to the full screens, and any member wish to ask? Yes, Councillor Bignell, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. 2 questions for the officer. The first one, the The old sandy lane, as I'll call it now, because you're creating a new sandy lane, at the top's obviously be terminated. Will there be access through there for cycles or pedestrians, or is it a total dead end?
Sorry, you're looking at the top
Yeah,
of
if you
the
go back
old
to your
sandy lane. Yeah, if I
couple of slides ago,
yeah,
there's another question on the
let
same
me,
one. The one with the pinks and the blues and things on.
yeah.
No, the one before that one.
Hang on. Here we go. This one.
Yeah, well, we'll go with that
or
one.
that one.
No, that's
Yeah.
the one.
Yeah.
Yes, because at the top end of the stopped, we go up a little bit further. There's what happens at the end there, because the road exists currently. You're going to kill that completely, or will that be an access for cyclists to get up there and join the new sandy lane?
I think the intention is to have a pedestrian link or a non-motorized. Basically, it will be closed to vehicles.
Yeah.
But I
still provision for
believe
pedestrians and cyclists, I hope.
I believe there will be. I can't recall off the top of my head whether there's a cycleway included in that. But
recommend it.
yeah, but there's certainly going to continue to be a sort of pedestrian link. But yes, there will be. It's effectively closed to vehicles.
And on that map, while you still got it up, the second question, the road to nowhere, as I call it, down the bottom there, it terminates before the red line of this application. There's a slight gap between the end of the road to nowhere, because if you go up to the end of the road to nowhere, then before that arrow, there's a gap. Is that gap actually in the ownership and sorted out at the end of it, or is there a strip at the end of it? No, further up at the end.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so the road to nowhere is this section here, and then this section.
There's a gap on the top of that one between that and the red line. That's the bit I worry about. What's happening there?
So what's happening there is this area is within Northampton Borough and is part of the Upton Lodge scheme, which is being delivered by Homes England.
Okay.
Homes England have, I understand they were signing a legal agreement to say that would be provided quite early on in their delivery. As yet, I'm not aware that they've actually issued a consent yet, though, for this scheme. But once that is issued, then that should come forward very quickly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
That's all right. Thank you very much. Any other members wish to ask a question? If you could revert the screen now, Suzanne, please.
Yeah.
Councillor Hollowell.
Suzanne, it's a question. It's regarding the Ramblers comment on 7.17. Talking about the equestrian crossing of the SLRR. I'm not quite sure where they're talking about there. I mean, I don't even know if it's relevant to this application, but I do think an underpass is not a good idea, actually.
Yes, if I share my screen, I can show you the location. Just bear with me again. So I can show you on this plan, but the area they're talking about is there's a bridleway footpath that basically runs through the site where I'm showing with my cursor. And where it crosses the Sandy Lane Relief Road here, they're proposing an at grade. So there is no underpass, but they're proposing a crossing, like a Pegasus crossing, suitable for horse riders. So it'll be in this location here.
Yeah, that's the best way of dealing with it. You can't have underpasses on bridleways. Riders bump their heads.
Well, they might, yes. Tall riders, anyway. Thank you. Councillor Cooper, you have a question.
Thank you, Chairman. I was actually going to raise the question of the underpass because I wasn't at all comfortable when I read that as well. But also, may I ask Suzanne about the condition where if the matters aren't satisfactorily resolved by the 9th of March, which is just next week, next Tuesday, I think, then there isn't any extension time agreed. What will happen if these matters aren't resolved by then, Suzanne?
Well, at the moment, I'm looking to agree an extension of time so that we've got some more time to discuss it. There was actually a meeting taking place just as this meeting was sort of beginning between highways, the technical highways engineers, to see if they could resolve it. And there are ongoing discussions to do with drainage as well. So I think it's going to take longer than the 9th of March. Yeah, so we are, and the applicant has already said that we will agree an extension of time next week.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Right,
you.
thank you very much. And any other questions that anybody wishes to put to the officer? No. Well, in that case, we'll invite Tim Colby, who is the agent for this particular application, to join us now. Mr. Colby, are you there? Can't see you on my screen at the moment. You were there before. Well, I can see. Well, I can see your. Well, can you switch your video on, please, Mr. Colby?
I don't know if you can hear me. Can you?
I can hear you, but I can't see you. We would
It's
love to
saying-
see you.
My computer is saying the video. Here we go.
Yes, there you are. Yes, I can see you now. We can all do so.
Okay.
Right. So, as is customary, you have 3 minutes in which to make your remarks, and then afterwards, committee members may want to ask you a question. So, go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. This development is already approved in principle, the hybrid planning permission having been issued last year. The permission includes outline consent for up to 1,900 dwellings and detailed permission for the routing of the Sandy Lane Relief Road through the site. On behalf of the applicant, we have been liaising with officers since last summer when the permission was issued, and this reserve matters application is now seeking approval for the site-wide infrastructure only. This includes further details of the relief road and further details of the drainage systems for the site. The detailed design and layout of individual residential parcels will be the subject of future reserve matters applications, so that's not part of this application today. Just as a bit of background, the sale of the first phase of housing has been agreed. The design code for the development has also been agreed, and the proposed infrastructure will now help with comprehensive and quicker delivery of the site. The relief road and drainage details we've submitted accord with the terms of the previously approved outline and hybrid submissions. As Suzanne Taylor has indicated, there have been discussions with both the County Council's highways and drainage teams. They've requested some further information and clarification of certain detailed elements, but I would stress that neither team has questioned the form of infrastructure we propose in principle, nor have they raised any fundamental concerns. Instead, they've raised questions about technical and design specifications. And both this week, as you've heard, in fact, there was one today, this week and last week, we've had constructive discussions with the highways and drainage teams and with your own officers. So we're confident that we can, if need be, agree minor revisions to the drawings and details submitted, which will address matters to the satisfaction of all parties. As you've just heard, we are also agreeable to an extension of time if that's required. And in conclusion, therefore, I agree with the officer's conclusions in the report that the principle of this development is already established. And I hope the committee will agree the recommendation so that we can finalise these detailed technical matters as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Well, you mentioned the meetings today. Is another meeting planned on these highways and drainage issues within a couple of days or so, that sort of timetable?
I wasn't on the meeting today because it overlapped with this committee, so I haven't heard the outcome. But if need be, there will be further discussions. Literally within days rather than weeks. We're keen to resolve this, obviously, as soon as possible.
Sense of urgency, indeed. All right, thank you. Right, any questions from members? Councillor Cooper, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, may I ask you, you mentioned about build timescales, and do you have any guidance that you can give us on that this afternoon?
I can't give you any specific details other than to say, as I mentioned, the sale of the first residential phase to a house builder has been agreed, and there have been pre-application discussions with your officers by that house builder. So I anticipate that they will move fairly shortly to making their own reserve matters application for that first phase. But obviously I'm not directly involved in that, so I can't give you precise timescales. But as I say, things are moving. The design code has been approved, and the applicant is clearly keen that development can start at the earliest opportunity.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other member wish to ask a question of Mr. Colby, since he's sitting there poised to answer? I don't think so. Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Colby, for joining us this afternoon. So if you'd like to leave the meeting, shutting your video and sound off, thank you very much. We have this before us. Now I will turn to the ward member, Councillor Cooper, first. You already said a few things, but you might like to say something else as part of our discussion to kick us off.
Thank you, Chairman. No, actually, my questions have been answered. I haven't got anything to add. I would like to thank Suzanne Taylor for her very informative and thorough report. A lot of work has gone into this moving forward. You know, basically it is what it is. So no, I haven't got anything further to add at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else like to say something? Not a great. Yes, Councillor Hollowell.
Very briefly, this has been allowing for what Councillor Townsend said earlier about the rate at which we're covering Northamptonshire in tarmac and concrete, allowing for that. Suzanne has done a really good job on this project. It's a very good report. And I wouldn't be at all surprised to find a little road there called Taylor Close one day, who knows. There is something that I wanted to say more to Paul. I presume he's still with us. And it's to do with the map, all of the maps, but the map for this particular report. I've complained about this before. These maps are not good enough, who's ever doing them. They're showing rights of way, but this really important one, the bridleway, disappears under what was a red line is now a black line. No, Paul. And it doesn't tell you whether it's a public footpath or a public bridleway. And it doesn't tell you the numbers. Suzanne has used the numbers correctly in the report, but it doesn't relate to the map. And I really think for the new council, you've got to get whoever does these maps, you've got to take them into a corner and explain to them exactly, you know, what we're required. I've often wondered why we don't get a coloured map, because the coloured map, which this is a coloured map printed in black and white, the coloured maps show much more detail and it's much easier to understand what's going on. And I'd commend that to the new council. But at the very least, these rights of way do need to be sorted out on the maps.
Paul Seckington.
Thank you, Chair. Following the last meeting where Councillor Hollowell raised similar concerns, particularly on the colour of the line that highlights the application site, which was known as blue, I've asked them to change that moving forward of new plans that they produce. This plan might have been produced some time ago in preparation for coming to this committee, but all new ones will change the templates. The site plan will be in red to highlight specifically that is the application site. In terms of rights of way, I also asked that question about can they distinguish between footpaths and bridleways, etc. And they say currently they only have one layer, and they're looking further into that to see if they can differentiate that further. So I'll also add the question whether they can highlight it with the number as well of the right of way. So when we move into West Northants, we can have more clearer plans. And we do produce the plan in colour to send to democracy to print for the agenda, and it does appear in colour online. Obviously, when they print it, it's black and white. That'd be a question for them services.
So as long as it's clear, that's all we want. So we can see what's what. And so I think you've answered that. Thank you. All right. Any other questions, or not questions, comments to make? In the absence of that, we have before us the recommendation to delegate to the Assistant Director of Planning to grant permission subject to those various points related to highways and drainage at the end of the report, and also that date of 9th of March, although that is a movable feast, it appears. Who would like to propose this recommendation? Yeah, Councillor Townsend, you're going to do that.
I will, why not?
Well, no, why? Indeed,
I propose we accept the officer's report.
Thank you. And Councillor Hollowell, you're putting your hand up to second it. So Leslie, let's have a vote, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So we're voting to approve this application. So it's Councillor Bignell. Are you for or against approval?
For.
Councillor Breeze.
For.
Councillor Budden.
For.
Councillor Clark. Oh, she's not here, I don't think.
Not
Councillor
here.
Cooper.
4.
Councillor Dallin.
4.
Councillor Hollowell.
4.
Councillor Johns.
4.
Councillor Samiotis. Councillor Samiotis. 4. Councillor Surgeson Brooke.
4.
Trouble with Councillor Samiotis' line.
Yes,
I
I
think.
thought she was saying 4, but I think it's I think she might have frozen actually. Oh yeah.
Well,
4, yes.
4, yeah.
Councillor Pritchard.
4.
Councillor Townsend.
4.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
4.
And Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
4.
So that's unanimous as well, Chairman. That's been approved.
Thank you. Right, let's go on to page 67, and this is our third application this afternoon. It will take us to the south of our district, land at Sparrow Lodge Farm, Wickham Park Road in Wickham. Oh, I've got a Councillor Surgeson Brooke waving her hand.
Only that I can't hear a word that Paul Seckington says.
Well, I was a little
the
concerned
microphone
too.
is sort of vibrating. I wondered if there's anything he can do about it.
Well, he could speak a bit more clearly. I was going to raise that with him. Paul, perhaps when we come to you next, you have the microphone a bit nearer your mouth or speak up so that we can all hear you.
That better.
I think your headset's on the way.
Well, slightly. I think it's still a bit muffled and it comes and goes. But
You're all right when you lean forward, but if you lean back, it disappears. I think it's your headset.
Okay.
maybe we won't require you again. But if we do, we'll try. I'll get you to speak more clearly. Thank you very much. Right, so we do go on, as I said, to Wickham Park Road, Wickham, and this is land at Sparrow Lodge Farm. Dennis Winterbottom is the case officer, and there he is. Dennis, over to you. Talk us through this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me all right.
Oh, we can. Yes, all of us, I think. Yes, yes.
That's fortunate today, then, because it hasn't been quite so good recently this week. Yes, this application is for a proposed renewable energy generation. I'll start to share my screen, hopefully very shortly.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm just going to set it up as a current slideshow, which hopefully will make it larger. So we'll start with the application site, which you can see from the inset map is located just to the north of the A422 Buckingham Road and to the south of Wickham Village and Dean's Hanger. The larger map shows the outline of the site with a red boundary, and with apologies to Councillor Hollywell, public footpath SF06 runs along the northwestern boundary, and the black line is obscured by the red application site line. So it runs from Wickham Park Road to the northern apex. And public footpath SF08 runs from the northern apex along the eastern boundary of the site down to the A442 Buckingham Road. It is made clear in the report, so I hope that that has been picked up. The application site also shows two areas of existing woodland. We have Jack's Copse in the centre of the site and Bedlam Copse, which is actually outside the site but adjacent to the sort of western boundary. Both sites are designated ancient woodland and both are designated local wildlife sites. The dotted hatching that you can see identifies areas of archaeological assets that are known to be near the site. The linear feature to the north is considered to be a possible route of a Roman road, and we have a moated site at to the west of the site. Other features are some distance from the site and aren't really affected by the development. The area of about 44 hectares. It consists of 5 irregular shaped fields. You can make out the outlines. These are subdivided by low hedgerows, which are currently managed at a height of about 1.5 to 2 meters. There are also some taller hedgerows with intermittent hedgerow trees, which are up to 5 metres, and together these provide a reasonable level of enclosure to much of the site. There is an overhead electricity transmission line which crosses the western part of the site between Bedlam Copse and Jacks Copse. The site itself can be connected to the electricity grid through Western Power's Distribution's existing network on Wicken Road. If I hopefully move on to the aerial, that should demonstrate the areas of woodland and give you a slightly clearer picture. It also shows clearly the existing solar array of solar farm, which is located to the east of the proposed site. This was granted permission about 4 or 5 years ago. Moving on to the site layout plan, this identifies the proposed fields and shows an illustrative arrangement of solar panels shown by the green hashing. It's illustrative at the moment for 2 reasons. One is the technology is evolving. So at the time that the development may be installed, should planning permission be granted, the applicant can take advantage of any technological evolution in the panels themselves. And secondly, to allow for further archaeological investigation and to allow for the possibility of areas to be excluded should that be necessary if mitigation is required, pending the outcome of the archaeological evaluation. The actual development is relatively minimal in the sense it consists of solar panels, and there could be up to 80,000 freestanding solar photovoltaic panels, which would have a generation capacity of about 20 megawatts, which is about, this is identified as being sufficient to supply about 6,000 average households with their electricity requirement. Associated development will consist of 2 electrical substations and 16 electrical current inverters, which will be sited in possibly 8 locations across the site. There will be a perimeter fence, largely as a security measure to keep out larger mammals such as deer. This would be about 2.4 meters high and would be positioned at an appropriate distance from the existing hedgerows. All the existing hedgerows on the site will be retained, and additional planting is proposed to enhance and to reinforce those hedgerows. And the existing hedgerows would also be allowed to grow to a higher and be managed at a greater height of up to about 2.5 to 3 meters to enhance the kind of enclosure that these provide. The vehicle access proposed is from Wicken Road. This will be taken from an existing field gate access, which is currently located sort of at the southern part of the western boundary, where it starts to run along the Wicken Park Road. A construction traffic management plan and traffic management measures are proposed during the construction period to ensure that a safe access can be taken from Wicken Park Road, and this would also include routings for construction, agreed routes for construction traffic from the A422. Permission is being sought for a specific period of 40 years. The proposal is that the electricity generation equipment will be removed either after that time or at any time before, should electricity generation cease on the site. Just briefly to touch on the planning policy, the current development plan makes no specific provision for larger scale renewable energy generation. National and local planning policy is generally supportive of renewable energy development, but it makes clear that this should be subject to the provision of detailed assessments to ensure the proposal is appropriate to the proposed location. The applicant has confirmed that the site here can be connected to the electricity distribution network, And in that context, it is a site that's suitable for the scale of the energy generation proposed. Detailed assessments have been undertaken of the impacts that have been identified, and those impacts are set out clearly in the report. The key impacts are on landscape character and on the landscape and visual impact. In terms of the effect on landscape character, the effect is limited to the 5 fields that would be covered by the solar panels. And it's considered that the scale of the impact can be accommodated within the landscape character area, which is the Littlewood Whittlebury Plateau, in this given the scale of the development. If I move my screen down, you can see what you should be able to see now is the application site within the landscape character designations. The Whittlebury Plateau in this area is kindly separated by the Tove Uplands. And although the application site covers a significant area of the southern part, there's still a large area of the character area, landscape character area that would remain. In terms of the visual impact, a detailed landscape and visual impact assessment has been undertaken, and this does identify that there would be some significant adverse visual effects. These, however, will be limited, are identified as being limited to the users of the 2 adjacent public footpaths. There will be other visual effects, but these are mainly in views that you would get from the south. Given the sloping topography of the site, views from the north are limited really to close views, and those would be limited to the users of the public footpaths. The site's not visible from either the settlements in Wicken or Dean's Anger, or from the nearest properties, which are about 1/2 kilometre to the north. The landscape and visual assessment was undertaken and identified 13 viewpoints. And if it would help, I can run you through the photographs that were taken from those viewpoints very briefly to give you an indication of the views that you would see with the existing vegetation. These would then, of course, be softened by the additional planting and the management arrangements that are proposed to increase the hedgerow heights. I propose to take you through the site in a clockwise direction, starting with viewpoint number 1, which is out to the east, and start with the distant views, which will then come closer into the site through the closer views from the south up to the very close views, and then along the western boundary around the north of the site and going out up to viewpoints 12 and 13, which are distant views from the north. So viewpoint 1 is from a distance, and if you can read the text, it actually says that you can't really see the site, which is in the distance here. Viewpoint 2, which is from down here, again, the site is hidden by existing vegetation. Viewpoint 3 is coming closer in, and you can just begin to see the fields that would form part of the application site. And you can just make out the existing solar park, which is visible here. The viewpoints now looking from the south here, and I've tried to identify on these viewpoints where you might catch glimpses of the proposed solar farm through the light grey shading, which you can see in the distance. Again, you can see the existing solar farm in viewpoint 4, which is here, and the adjacent fields would be where the proposed solar farm would be. In viewpoint 5, you've got quite a considerable masking of the enclosure of the site and a limited amount of visibility. We're now coming close to the site. This is the existing access to the solar farm, which you can see at the gates on your right, and an access to an existing farm access. The applicant, this is outside the applicant's control, and therefore has not been proposed as an access for the current proposed solar farm. Viewpoint 6 is a close view from the Buckingham Road, and you can see that it would be visible above the hedges, although these hedges would again be maintained at a higher level and therefore would soften the visual impact. Viewpoint 14 is on the Wickham Park Road now, and we're starting to go up the western side. The proposed solar farm is actually, you can just about make it out in the centre, so you would have a very limited view from this particular vantage point. We're now further up Wickham Park Road at one of the second field access. Again, this is taken from a vehicle, so from the vehicle you already have a degree of enclosure by the hedgerows, and glimpses would be, again, this is an area where additional planting is proposed to reinforce the hedgerow in this location. We're now moving on to the public footpath. This is the start of footpath SF06 as it leaves Wickham Road. And this is where you would begin to catch glimpses of the solar park. The area you can see I've tried to highlight in grey is the area that will be covered by the solar panels. Again, there is mitigation proposed through additional planting here to create a corridor for the public footpath. Obviously, until this matures, you would have views of the solar park installation. Viewpoint 10 is taken from the intersection of the two footpaths. Footpath SF06 runs off to the right of the screen, and footpath SF08 runs on the other side of the hedge, moving into the distance. Viewpoint 11 is taken from a continuation of public footpath SF06, and you can see the grey areas where you would catch views of the proposed solar park, and you can just on the left-hand side see the existing solar panels. Moving away further to the north, you can see from viewpoint 12 that again you can't actually see the site. And of course, further from viewpoint 13, again, you can't really see the site. So there are no distant views from the north of the site, and the close-up views are limited only to the immediate, the public footpaths that are immediately adjacent to the site. So in conclusion, the proposal will deliver both environmental and economic benefits, both in terms of providing a renewable source of energy, and there will be some enhancement of biodiversity through the mitigation proposals, through the additional planting mitigation. There will be also some adverse effects in the short term through the traffic management measures that are likely to be required during the construction period. The construction period is likely to last for about 4 months. The recommendation is to delegate to the Assistant Director for Planning and Economy to grant permission subject to the recommended conditions and any amendments to those conditions that are deemed necessary. Just to mention in the updates that conditions 11 and 14 have been amended already in response to the further comments received from the County Archaeological Advisor to ensure that the appropriate archaeological investigation can be undertaken through trial trenching and to ensure that any mitigation necessary can be implemented. And that's the end of the presentation, Chair.
Yep, thank you very much indeed for all of that and the a range of pictures. Martin, Councillor Johns, your question first.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question. I know these applications aren't subject to SIL, but has there been any discussions about Section 106 agreement? I am aware that similar schemes in other parts of our district have come to agreements with local parishes for a contribution, an annual contribution.
I understand that there is an arrangement being put in place between the applicant and Wickham Parish Council, but no details of that have been submitted with this application, so I have no details of the arrangement, and it's not formed part of the consideration in the officer recommendation on this proposal. But my understanding is that there is an arrangement being pursued as a third-party arrangement between the applicant and Wickham Parish Council.
Well, perhaps that's a question that might be posed to the agent when he appears before us shortly. Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question is regarding, well, I've got two questions actually. The first one is regarding the copse. You say there's the copse is going to stay. Is that going to be enhanced and be fenced off so that livestock and animals and that can either stay in, or a pathway being created so that they can get out through into the countryside? That's the first question. And
right, let's do it one by one, shall we?
Okay, thank you.
Dennis?
Yes, that was an issue that was raised by the ecology officer, and following through discussions with the applicant, it's been agreed that we can maintain a corridor to link Bedlam Copse with Jack's Copse to provide an access corridor for wildlife, and also to ensure that the deer security fence is constructed with appropriate mechanisms to allow small mammals to pass through that fence to maintain the ability for small mammals to transverse across the site and to take advantage of those two woodland areas.
That's great. The second question is regarding the Buckingham and River Ouse International Drainage Board. Have we had the responses from them yet?
We have had a response from them. They raised the matter of what they called storm water runoff.
Yeah.
And therefore there's a condition recommended for details of the drainage arrangements to be submitted for approval. Given the development on this site, it is largely not going to affect the existing surface water arrangements, because the ground mounted array will be mounted on poles.
Mm-hmm.
So there won't be any significant alteration to the drainage characteristics, but it is appropriate for those to be submitted and approved, and that's what the condition recommends.
Yes, thank you, because as it's going to be sort of electricity creating, I thought it would be an important thing to raise. Thank you for your comments.
Is that it? Okay, thank you very much. Let's now go to Councillor Bignell. Question from you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was trying to understand the classification of the agricultural land, and well, I'm always sceptical on these things when they put it on best agricultural land. And I was reading through, and it mentions grade 3 and subgrade 3, and I was trying to understand, officer, what it actually is on this site, please.
Right, yes, there has been a detailed agricultural land classification. The generally available agricultural land classifications broadly, the maps that you can generally access, subdivide agricultural land into grades 1, 2 and 3. Grades 1 and 2 are classified as best and most versatile agricultural land. Grade 3 has been subsequently divided into two grades, grade 3A and grade 3B. Grade 3A is included in best and most versatile agricultural land. Grade 3B is not included in best and most versatile. However, the published data only identifies grade 3. So in all these cases, it is important that a detailed land classification survey of the actual site is undertaken. That has been undertaken in this case, and details have been submitted, and they've identified that over 90% of the site is subgrade 3B. So it's not best and most versatile agricultural land.
Excellent answer. Thank you, officer.
Good, thank you. Councillor Pritchard. You're on mute at the moment.
You take it off. That's it. Thank you, Chair. I've got 4 or 5 questions.
Oh, well, let's do it one by one.
One by one. What is the height of the particular solar panels? Are they the same height as the existing installation next door?
Well, if I share my screen again, I can take you back to the on the plan here, you've got a diagrammatic representation of the solar panel mounting. You probably can't read the details.
Well, we can't see the screen at the moment, so
right, okay.
at all.
I've got it sharing here, so I don't know why it's
No,
not sharing.
we're not sharing it yet.
I mean, just to answer the question.
Just tell us what the height is.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to answer the question, the panels will be mounted at an angle of 25 degrees. The lower edge will be about 0.8 meters above the ground, so 80 centimeters. The top edge will vary between 2 to 2.4 meters, and that will be about due to the ground undulation of the ground. So it's about 0.8 meters at the lower edge, up to about 2 meters at the higher edge.
I actually know the site, so hence I was comparing what's existing as opposed to what actually is proposed. Next thing actually is 40 years. That seems an awful long time. I thought most of these sort of installations were 25 years.
When I first dealt with these, 20 years, 25 years was the period that people were looking for. I am aware that subsequently some of those permissions that were granted have been subsequently extended to 40 years. I think it's a question you may want to put to the applicant, but my understanding is that the technology is evolving and therefore the lifespan of the technology is now greater and therefore the longer periods that are being sought.
I will ask that question, but when you think of technology, probably I always tend to think of technology as actually having the shorter period rather than longer. But anyway, I'll do.
What's your next question then?
With regards to the overhead cables, you know, the extra power that's being generated, will there be extra overhead cables coming away from the site?
The details we've been provided is that there will be a grid connection, a connection to the electricity distribution network via Western Power Distribution existing infrastructure, but that's within Wickham Park Road, so there won't be any additional overhead connections.
Next one actually is with regards to 9.11e. You talk about sensitive lighting scheme. What does that mean? You know, surely then you're not going to light those up at night.
I think in the report it makes clear that there is no proposal to be any lighting. The closed circuit television cameras that will be installed are going to work through infrared, so they will not have any require for any external lighting. So the current proposal does not include any external lighting.
Has also, next question, has any anticipation of any agricultural use for this area, for example, perhaps grazing of you know, some of the pasture land that could be developed?
The proposal does make reference to the height of the panels will allow for the land to be grazed by sheep.
Yeah,
that would be a matter obviously for any particular landowner wanting to take that up.
And the last question, actually, what type of security fencing will be proposed?
The proposed fencing, which again details would need to be submitted and approved. The typical fencing proposed is a wire mesh fence mounted on timber poles, and it's more of a deer type security fence rather than a Paladin security fence that you might see around an industrial site.
Thank you very much indeed, officer. Thank you.
All right, okay. Any other questions of the officer? Yes, all right, Councillor Hollowell. We can't hear you at the minute.
No,
yeah,
no, sorry.
It's all right.
A couple of questions, actually. First of all, have we consulted with Western Airfield? It's about 13 kilometres away.
From memory, I don't think that was one of the consultees.
Do you think we should have done? I'm thinking about glare and the PPG.
A glint and glare assessment has been submitted, and that suggests there will be no significant glare from the site. If there's a specific concern with regard to Western Airfield, I'm not aware of it.
But I'm just thinking that that's the nearest airfield, discounting, you know, those on at Silverstone. The second question is the bases for the panels. How deep do they go? On what is proposed this time?
In terms of the intrusive depth into the ground,
Yes.
There are different mountings, I believe, that you can provide. You can have pole mountings. The details of how far deep they would need to go have not been provided at the moment, but that would be details that will need to be submitted and approved. There is an alternative arrangement for mounting, which involves the use of concrete plinths, which avoids the need to go deeper for deeper sort of footings.
Yeah, I'm
Those
familiar
are
with
often
those.
used where you find sensitive archaeology or other
Exactly.
And that's why the county archaeologist's advice is to carry out the trial trenching evaluation before agreeing the details of the solar panel layout.
Yeah. Okay, agreed. Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Okay. Well, there may be other questions, but we have the agent with us also on this at this meeting, Mr. Gareth Gardner. Do I see you? Yes, I do. Good afternoon, Mr. Gardner.
Good afternoon.
Right. Well, you've got 3 minutes to say a bit, and then I dare say there will be some questions from colleagues. So go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Many thanks for allowing me to speak, and to Mr. Winterbottom for his comprehensive officer's report. National Grid anticipates annual electricity demand in the UK could increase to, well, from 285 terawatts in 2018 up to 422 terawatts in 2050. That's an increase of 48%. Similarly, peak demand could increase from 60 gigawatts to 82 gigawatts, an increase of 37% over the same period. There is therefore an urgent need to increase electricity capacity in the UK to ensure a stable and safe supply for the future. The key benefit of solar over other energy sources is that solar installation can only be, matter of months for installation and operation, and it's a proven and safe, stable technology. Why this location? Well, Elgin has undertaken a robust and effective site selection exercise to identify suitable areas for solar development to meet the electricity demand in that network area. This extensive site selection exercise considers several planning policy, environmental and technical criteria. Through discussions with the district network operator, the demand for additional energy generation capacity was identified. Elgin entered into discussions with Western Power Distribution and secured a grid offer in late 2018. This application has been 3 years in the planning, with pre-applications in December 2017 and November 2018. Following favourable pre-applications, we undertook letter drops and leaflet drops surrounding villages and held a public consultation event in July 2019. Refined proposals were presented to Wickham Parish Council at their meeting of September 2019. Following positive feedback, the applicant submitted their application in October 2019. From this date, we've been working hard and liaising with all the consultees to get various agreements, which has proved beneficial, and there are no objections from either statutory consultees or members of the public. We have worked with the council and their advisors and undertaken extensive additional works covering highways, landscape and archaeology in order to alleviate any concerns. As evidenced in the officer's report, we believe that this work has now meant that we can adequately address any concerns raised through suitably addressed pre-commencement conditions. In summary, this application would deliver significant environmental and economic benefits in terms of providing a source of renewable energy through up to 600 homes, together with helping to reduce the UK carbon emissions and provide construction jobs, together with complying with policy. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Can I take it you have a guarantee from National Grid that they would be able to deal with any all the energy that will be generated were this to be agreed? We've had applications elsewhere where they've had some challenges.
As far as I've been aware, and I have not been told elsewhere that they have secured the grid offer back in 2018.
Just one point raised by a colleague about the possible glint and glare that might arise from these panels if they were situated there, and the effect on air traffic. Any comments on that?
Well, it wasn't something that came up on consultation. We've done the.
Do you think it should have done?
Not necessarily. We've done these. We've done some of these closer to. We've actually done these applications actually at airports. There's quite large solar parks at Stansted Airport, and they've not created any glint and glare for ongoing. It'll all depend on flight paths, etc. But it wasn't picked up, or it wasn't for the adjacent application either. So,
all right, okay. Well, let's go to other questions. Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Mr. Gardner, you may have heard my question to the officer regarding the equivalent of a Section 106 with
yes.
Wycombe. I mean, obviously, whatever you say has no impact on our discussions regarding your application, but from an interest point of view, are you looking to make a regular contribution to Wycombe?
Yes, I can confirm that the applicant has signed a third-party agreement with Wycombe Parish Council already last year for securing of funds, either as a one-off payment or how they see fit, depending, and that will be payment on energisation of the actual facility. So when it's built, connected to the grid and everything else. So that has been that's been secured. That was something that the applicant was keen to do.
Thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Townsend.
Just the question of the height was raised. Compared with the one next door, is the height of your ones going to be the same, or are they higher or lower?
Be very similar. Yes, it'll be very similar. I can't remember what the ones were next door, but yeah, there'll be a very similar height. It basically goes on the sort of lie of the land where they tilt to the angles to get the best when they're putting banks.
All right, Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. One of the questions that came up, normally the experience so far with these, the length of time that these panels are in place is normally 25 years. I noticed that yours is 40 years. Is there any reason for that?
We've been doing a lot of applications now. Must have done 50, 60 applications now, and they're all going to 40 years. We started, it was 2 years ago, there were 30 years, and now we've actually extending those to 40 years. Basically, it's just down to the technology is a lot more robust now. The panels are a lot more robust, so they're lasting longer, and there's a bit more of a maintenance regime to those. So it means that they last longer, and they're a lot more efficient.
Just as an interest, and obviously this doesn't reflect with regards to approval, but will the equipment and the panels be made in the UK?
I wouldn't be able to answer that question at this time because the technology changes so much. It depends on the panels that the applicant would use.
It would be a pity if it isn't, but
no, yes, true.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Any other questions to Mr. Gardner? No, I don't think I can see anybody else showing a desire to ask you one. Well, thank you, Mr. Gardner, very much indeed for your presentation. If you care to leave us now, and we will then deliberate the application. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So, waiting for you to, he's gone. All right, so we have this application in front of us. Who wants to say something, who hasn't, or perhaps wants to say something else again? Councillor Townsend.
Yeah, I mean, this obviously is flavour of the month. So I think we'd be very pushed to refuse the application anyway. But anyway, isn't it so much better than wind farms? That I do think. The other thing is actually we did have a site visit to the application, to the one which was built now 3 or 4 years ago, I think. And certainly from going along the Buckingham Road, you I have to say, you really don't, you hardly can see it. And that does say to me that these wind farms are fine when it is flat and when it is very well fenced. And happily here, it is well fenced, and with the additional thing, that's really important. So, but we have got an awful lot in this area because they're along the A5 as well. But that's the state of it, I suppose. In the west of the district, it is much more questionable because of the sloping and the much more rolling countryside. But here, I think it will fit in perfectly well, and therefore I would personally back this scheme.
Perhaps the sun shines more these parts of the district. I don't know. All right, Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. I know this area very well indeed, and I must admit, over the years, actually, I didn't even realise that it was actually there, and I've passed along the Buckingham Road many, many times. I also think, obviously, from an environmental point of view, like Councillor Townsend says, it's much better, I think, visual-wise, to actually have solar panels rather than wind farms. But once again, I think it's, and if I may say that, the officer has portrayed a very good report, and also, and I think he'll agree with all the various elements that he showed, photographs from lots and lots of different areas. It's virtually invisible. So I would certainly recommend this proposal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johns.
Yes, I support this proposal. I think it is a very suitable location. It is quite a discreet location. But one of the biggest factors for companies in choosing sites, it isn't simply how well they can tuck away the site is. The key point is the connectivity to the grid, and it won't be for this committee because we're disappearing. But for the new council, I would hope that they will bear this in mind in terms of, this is the second site in a similar location, and I wouldn't want to see vast areas of our district covered with solar farms. And I think that there is certainly something to be watched out for, because if there is more connectivity put in by Western Power or the power authorities, there'll be more pressure for more solar farms. And although whilst they are very much needed, it has to be balanced against the sensitivity of the landscape within our area of South Northamptonshire, or as to be West Northamptonshire. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, we hope that our future colleagues will take note of those sentiments. We don't want our whole countryside covered with these things. Let's have a turn now from Councillor Holman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few points to make, really. First of all, on the rights of way, the two rights of way, SF6 and 8, there was something in the officer's report about the possibility of planting another hedge on the northern side, SF6. According to my map, SF6 is on the other side of the hedge anyway. So before they spend a lot of money on more hedging, you probably need to check the definitive map there. SF8 up the eastern boundary is a little bit more complicated. The bottom 3/4 is on the other side of the hedge, on the same side as the existing solar park. And I think the plan was they were going to plant a second hedge there. But the top quarter, I suspect, is not walked on the proper legal line, because the legal line crosses through the hedge of the kink in the hedge and is in this new site. So they may need to do something there, I don't know. Regarding hedges generally, where the existing solar park is, it has got a very good, very tall hedge, and you can't see it from the road. When you move down onto this new section, there are long patches of what we might call ordinary height hedge, and they will need to reinforce that if they want to hide the solar park, because the downside is they'll also be hiding very attractive countryside behind it, rolling countryside. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts. You'll lose something nasty, but you will lose something quite attractive. And finally, just a note on the community funding. This is not a material consideration, but I don't know, and I don't really want to know what deal they've struck with the parish council. But a similar park to this one in my ward a few years ago that accrued £60,000 for parishes, plus the offer of another 20,000 if they move into the next field. So just to give you a ballpark idea of the sort of sums of money that are involved, or should be. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't know whether Mr. Winterbottom wanted to comment on the footpath and the hedge reference there. Do you?
I can make a comment. I think there is some discrepancy between what seems to be shown on the definitive maps and the routes that are actually followed on the ground. I'm not entirely... The proposals do include additional hedgerow planting to provide a separation between the footpath and the solar panel installation. Again, those details will need to be approved, so we can pay careful attention to those at the time they come forward.
Okay, fair enough. Right, well, I think we've had a pretty good discussion on this. Who would like to move the recommendation? Councillor Townsend proposing and Councillor Johns seconding. I happen to see your hands first. Leslie, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So we're voting for approval of this application. So are you for or against approval? Councillor Bignell.
For.
Councillor Breeze.
For.
Councillor Budden.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Dallin.
For.
Councillor Hollowell.
For.
Councillor Johns.
For.
Councillor Samiotis.
For.
Councillor Surgeson Brooke.
For.
Councillor Pritchard.
For.
Councillor Townsend.
For.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
For.
And Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
For.
That's unanimous again, Chairman, so that's been approved.
Indeed so. Right, let's press on. We have one application to go.
No,
So,
tea break.
well, I was thinking if we could just press on, you could have your tea break in half an hour. So, well, depending how long we choose to talk about this next application, but unless the committee is really so desperate for a tea break, I'd like to press on. Is that the committee happy with press on? Yeah, I get a thumbs up from Councillor Cooper. That'll do as a starter. Right, let's get on with this one. So this is Land off Banbury Lane, Tattershall. Case Officer Ashley Bidwell. Ashley, go over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. I'll just share my screen. All right, is that coming across okay?
It is.
Right. So this application is for one dwelling. The site is to the eastern edge of Tattershall village, just off of Banbury Lane, which pretty much cuts straight through the middle of Tattershall. A similar application was brought to committee, in 2016. However, at the time, this was outside of the village confines, and these have since been updated with the adoption of the Part 2 local plan in July last year. And as you can see on the new site, on the current site plan, the village confines end on the eastern edge of the site, as you can just see by my cursor here. The site will be accessed directly from Banbury Lane, but it is also currently accessed from the garden area of 30 Malice Field, as it seems to be currently, or at least formerly, belonging to the garden area of that property. Let's move on to the aerial plan. So the western boundary of the site, which is this one here, backs onto the residential gardens of Silver Birches, number 5 School Lane, and Meadow View, I believe it was. So this is delineated by a 1.5 metre fence of the rear gardens. The northern boundary running along Banbury Lane has a 4 or 5 metre hedgerow. As I'll show in the photos later on, there's a temporary gate that's been installed in the location of where the access will be, albeit the new access will be sited further back. The southern boundary along here also has a 1.8 meter fence, and then the eastern boundary has another tall 4 or 5 meter hedge similar to the northern boundary. The site mainly consists of cut grass, with the central area of the site having been used as a form of allotment. Moving on to the plans. So it's a mostly linear layout, with the bedroom area sited in the 1.5 story element, which is this section, and then the rest of the living space is in the single story element at the southern end, which I will show again on the elevation plan. So here is where the bedroom area mainly comprises, and then this single story element is more like the dining room and the kitchen area. So the overall design is one of a somewhat contemporary nature. However, it does have traditional cues, such as the narrow gable depths and the steep roof pitches in accordance with our design guidance. Let me move on to the section, sorry. If this will get out of the way, there we are. Okay, so the site, as I will show again in some photographs, is at a lower level than the properties along School Road, sorry. And it drops even further from running west to east. And part of the proposal is to level off the land, which will set the property at an even lower level than, which is partly showed here. So you will have the 1.3 meter hedge, and then further along the 1.8 meter fence, and then this property will be sunk into the land further, even more. Moving on to the photographs. So this is looking from Banbury Lane. The access, if you can just see my cursor, is before the signpost, and I have a photograph of the temporary access that I mentioned earlier. So this is where the proposed access will be, albeit sited further back into the site to meet highway standards. And this is a view from the other side. This is the western boundary facing Silver Birches and number 5 School Road. So this is the 1.8 meter fence that's currently there, and then it moves into a similar height hedge. This is where it moves into the hedge at the back of number 5. This is looking along the western boundary, and then towards the southern boundary, and you can start to see the land level drop away from this western side over to the eastern side, and then where it opens up into the garden area of number 30. And this is actually a photo from the previous application in 2016, looking from the garden area of Silver Birches. This is, if I go back to the aerial photograph, it's actually standing approximately in the patio area, so around here. So just looking across and over to where roughly the garage would be sited. Again, as mentioned, this is the southern boundary with the opening up into 30 Malice Field. And then this is the northern boundary. This is an older photograph, so the opening previously showed to you is not actually shown there at this point. And then this is just more photographs to show the elevation change as previously mentioned. If I go back to the site plan, sorry. The issues for consideration here are, of course, the principle of development, the visual impact of the development on the area, the impact of the development on amenities of the neighbouring properties, namely Silver Birches, 5 School Road and Meadow House, and the impact of the development on highway safety. In terms of constraints, as mentioned, it is within the confines of Tattershall now since July last year. Tattershall is a 3rd category secondary village as outlined in policy SS1. There are no conservation areas or listed buildings within the vicinity of the site. In terms of updates to the reports, I set out a couple of typos that were missed, and so that throughout the report, but otherwise there's no updates from consultees or anything. Following consideration of the merits of the application, officers recommend that it's approved, subject to the conditions listed in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. If you could revert the screen now. Thank you. Any questions that anyone wishes to put to the officer at this point? Councillor Bignell.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Had the officer considered moving the 30-mile-an-hour limit further back up the road to the east? The property entrance is just inside the 30-mile-an-hour limit. I accept it's in there. That's quite a quick bit of road along there, and I thought it might have benefited from slowing traffic down a little bit earlier before they got to the thing. I mean, it's not a massive case. I just wonder if they thought about moving it back, officer. Thank you, Chair.
I haven't. Sorry, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
I haven't personally asked that of the applicants at this stage, simply because Highways haven't raised any objections. So I took it on face value that the application was safe in terms of highway safety.
Okay, it is very quick along there. Then it is what it is. Okay.
It is what it is. All right. Well, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Bidwell? I see none. So in that case, we have the applicant, Mr. Roger Clark, who I think will come on screen now. I hope he will. And we can see him as well. Yes, I can see him there. Okay, well, you know the form. If you could open your microphone, and you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Chairman, I think you were going to ask the ward councillor first.
No, I wasn't. I'm going by the usual procedure, the applicant first, and then I shall go to the fellow ward councillor.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I'm applying for a planning consent to build a 1.5-storey dwelling using the latest energy efficient materials, together with external materials that interpret those used elsewhere in the village. My pre-application meeting with the case officer, Ashley Bidwell, was extremely helpful and provided guidance for this application. Ashley is recommending this application for approval and has presented the committee with a very comprehensive information pack, which covers all aspects of this application. Had members been able to have a site visit, they would have been able to witness the suitability of the site. In the absence of the visit, pictures which have been shared with you propose the dwelling and the site itself have been shared with you. And I'm sure all members of the committee will have read and absorbed the application details enclosed within their notes. In 2016, a similar application, although recommended for approval by planning officers, was refused by this committee because the land was outside the parish confines. During the intervening years, SNC has updated its 1997 South Northamptonshire plan, completing its review of all parish confines throughout the district, including developments in this parish, such as Shoemaker Close in Ascot and Mallasfield in Tattershall. This application site is now within the village confines. The application conforms to all the relevant policies, the land is within the village confines, and Highways have approved the entry design. The proposed dwelling is a family home, which also caters for disability living. South Northampton building land in hand figures have been challenged in recent times and currently have an outstanding appeal against a development in a local village. A high proportion of SNC's building land in hand is made up from small developments under 5 dwellings and individual plot applications. This needs to be maintained. If not, developers will continue with speculative applications in vulnerable villages. Tattershall has an excellent primary school which services several surrounding villages. It has a vibrant community of over 40 groups and associations that use a village hall which has just completed a £300,000 refurbishment to suit modern-day requirements with disability facilities. There are playing fields that cater for soccer, including some toaster teams, cricket and tennis, as well as a children's formal play area. This really is a village that needs support growth. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any member got a question they'd like to put to the applicant? I see none, so thank you very much indeed. If you could leave us in terms of the video and the audio, thank you. Now we have the ward member, Councillor Sandy Smallman, and I would call upon her to address the committee, please. She's currently on mute. Can you unmute it, Councillor Smallman?
Click the blue bar at the top first.
May depend on which equipment you're using, but you can't unmute it at the moment. Well, in order not to delay the committee, I will come back to you, Councillor Smallman, rest assured. Perhaps a member of the committee would like to say a few words just to show that we are exercised about this application one way or another. Who would like to say something? Councillor Townsend.
I wouldn't want to disappoint. Actually, it's interesting, the alteration of the village confines lines came about because in the original applications, application of how we judge those lines, we went through gardens. As I recollect now, in the new one, we rather intended to go outside gardens. So it just shows actually that change has made a lot more properties actually quite liable to have development, because obviously if it's within the confines, there's no policy reasons why we shouldn't, why it shouldn't be allowed. But I think it is interesting that because we tended to go to include gardens in the confines, these applications now can come forward.
Indeed, thank you very much for your observations there. Councillor Smallman, you're still muted. Is there a chance we could hear your voice? I think we can. Yes, we can. No, right, but go ahead before anything goes wrong. You're the ward member.
Thank you, Chairman. I've switched pieces of equipment. Good afternoon and good afternoon, members. As we've all heard, the site, the application site is 1,043 square meters, with 1.8 meter rising to 2.5 meters, close board fencing and natural hedging, with Leylandii boundaries, and is within the village confines. The proposal is to build a 1.5-storey detached dwelling to disability standards with entry/exit onto Banbury Lane. As the locally elected member, I've made a site visit and have satisfied myself that the dwelling will not be visible from the road, as the 4.5 metre high Leylandii hedge on the road side of the site, which appears to me would obscure the whole site. The entry/exit will be a very safe 5-metre splay, providing visibility exceeding 200 metres in both directions. The dwelling will be end on to the road with a detached garage. Both of those buildings are having doors generously provisioned for disability vehicles to access with ease for the user. A suitable driveway, electric gates, sensitive movement lights around the dwelling, and an alarm system, all providing a high level of security. The foul and surface drainage runs through the site from Malice Field to Banbury Lane and is easily accessed through on-site manholes. The distance from the neighbouring vehicles and the height of the proposed dwelling are well within S&C guidelines, and the height could be further improved by levelling the site to the lower level of the land. During the process of putting together our draft local plan a few years ago, and then being chair of the planning committee at the time, I had many discussions with Andy Darcy, our then planning policy officer, regarding S&C's responsibility to provide some quality disability housing. we ensured that that provision was included in the plan, and thus fulfilling a real need for disability housing within our community. So, Chairman, excuse me, the pre-app guidance was taken on board by the applicant and adhered to. The site is within the village confines. Distance and height are well within SNC's guidelines, and the planning officer's excellent report recommends that this application should be for approval. And consequently, I fully support the application and ask members of the planning committee to approve the application this afternoon. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Smallman. Now, does anybody else want to say something? Councillor Townsend, your yellow hand is still in the air. Does that mean you wish to say something else, or have you forgotten to lower it? That's the thing. Yeah, I thought you'd forgotten to lower it. Right, let's go to Councillor Hollowell, whose yellow hand is up.
Which will fade away, I'm sure, eventually. Chairman, I think it's just fairly straightforward. The application is in perfect concord with the development plan. I'm not aware of any material matters which would steer us in a different direction. And so I support the application.
I'm grateful. Thank you very much, Councillor Surgerson Brooke. Can you unmute your mic, please, so that we can hear what you've got to say? I know it's a bind.
I've never found out how to put that yellow hand up.
Oh, well, never mind. I saw your hand waving, so that.
It's very rare for an application for a bungalow, and they are. We used to have lots, but now we have very, very few. So I see absolutely no reason it's within the village boundary, and I think it's a very good idea. And if anybody wants to ask for somebody to propose it, I would be delighted to.
Well, I might in a moment, but I'm just going to make sure nobody else wants to say something first. I don't think they do. So in that case, I shall ask you, sir. Oh, yes, they do. Yes, they do. Another yellow hand, Councillor Breeze.
Thank you. Yeah, so all the policy objections that were there in 2016 have fallen away. But just it's been raised as a point for the application, and I'm not having any beef with it at all, but just as a point of clarification that it's suitable for disabled occupation, which is great. But is there any policy means by which then it's if such an application came forward, that it would only be for the occupier, if it just was justified on disabled disability access grounds, or can it still stay within sort of the open market?
Well, Ashley Bidwell, do you want to answer that one, if you can?
Thank you, Chair. I did just see Paul flash up. I'm not sure if he was ready to answer that as well.
Well, let's go. All right, the other boss, Paul Seckington, what do you want to say then?
If it had been only acceptable because it was a disabled person's dwelling, then potentially, yeah, we might have put a condition on it to make sure it stayed like that in perpetuity. But as it's acceptable on its own rights within the confines, then there'll be no reason to attach that condition.
I completely get that. That was your first point that I just wanted to understand for future applications. So thank you.
Good. Okay. I'm looking to see if anybody else wants to put their yellow hand up or any hand up, but I don't think they do. So in that case, Councillor Johns does.
Just wanted to propose we the officer's recommendation.
Well, no, I'll get, you can second it if you want, but Councillor Surgerson Brooke had already intimated she wanted to propose, and you've had a go at doing this earlier, so we'll get her to do it, presuming she's still agreeable.
You may second it, Councillor Johns, if you wish.
Well, right. All right, Leslie, I think you've got the running off.
I would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Let's have a vote on this.
Yes.
Then.
Thank you, Chairman. So we're voting for approval of this application. So are you for or against approval? That's Councillor Bignell, please.
For.
Councillor Breeze.
For.
Councillor Budden.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Dallin.
For.
Councillor Hollowell.
For.
Councillor Johns.
For.
Councillor Samiotis.
For.
Councillor Surgerson Brooke.
For.
Councillor Pritchard.
For.
Councillor Townsend.
For.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
For.
And Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous again, Chairman. So that application has been approved.
Indeed, I'm grateful. Well, thank you very much indeed. Well, that makes a little bit of history because that's the last application that the South Northamptonshire Planning Committee will ever consider. But we will have another meeting next month, we hope, but we won't be called the same thing. It'll be an area planning committee of the Shadow West Northamptonshire Council. A bit of a mouthful, but it'll be amount to the same thing in effect. So I hope that we'll be seeing you.
Do we have a date?
Well, we don't, but if I had to hazard a guess, it will probably be either the Thursday, the 8th or the 15th. But we will see. It will be deliberated upon and you will be told. But meantime, thank you very much to all of you for your contributions this afternoon, and particularly for those of you who have been on this committee and when it was called Development Control many, many years ago. And all of that and all the officers who've helped us along the way. We couldn't do it without your expertise and guidance. So the meeting closes at 4:45 Thursday afternoon, and a very good afternoon to you all as we say goodbye to our viewers.